Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Nexus of Geek. This is a new DM, Ariel, and today I wanted to go ahead and take on a topic that I don't think I've covered in the past in my videos. Others may have, but I certainly have not, and that is the role of playing a monster as a player character. What about as the PC as a monster? Now, turning our attention back again to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, Gary Gygax had some really strong opinions about it and came out, surprisingly enough, or maybe surprising to more modern gamers, against the idea of having a monster as a playable character. Now, we know that if you're coming from the 5th edition or even 4th edition or even as back as 3rd edition, there were some exceptions made to this. More, I think, in the modern game than anything else. Definitely not as much in AD&D. And I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the reasons provided why this was discouraged early on. I'm looking at page 21, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, of the Dungeon Master's Guide from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. We came out around 1977, 79, around there. 77, I think. I think of it as more early 80s because I got my copy in 1983. But be that as it may, whatever the case might be, there is a whole page dedicated after they describe Gary described the character classes available to players in the game. There is a whole section about playing the monster as a player character, and when I think about it, it's very interesting to note that the later editions of Dungeons and Dragons, there's a meme, for example, that I think about and I've seen running around the internet where they have a picture of the first edition or OSR, as they like to call it, old school Renaissance, first edition Dungeons and Dragons, even basic D&D versus 5e. And the basic or the OSR picture is a group of adventurers, typical, humanoid or human-centered group, similar to what the cover of Swords Coast Adventures Guide for 5th edition, if you're familiar with that volume, where they have, the different classes running around with their weapons. And then that is contrasted with the 5th edition party, which is more monster-based. And they have the weird creatures, chieflings, and other monsters as part of the party. And it became a bit of a meme, and I saw it running around quite a bit online, especially on OSR circles. And the idea being, or the premise being that, a more traditional humanoid-based, human-centric, what's the term? Humanocentric group of adventurers is more in line with the traditional, conventional party that people were used to back then, as opposed to what people are used to now, which is more of a free for all. You can play all these different races, including an orc. There was a whole recent controversy about the orcs as playable characters for 2024. Now they've been playable, half orcs been playable characters since, I believe, first edition. They went away for a while during the whole satanic panic of the 80s, and after they were trying to sanitize some of the public's perception of the game for a second edition, but they came back in the year 2000 with third edition. The half orcs were back, and so were the devils, and so were all these creatures that they took out. But I digress. The point is, I want to center and focus the discussion on what the perception of playing a monster character was back then, as opposed to some of the more recent developments in the game. And we'll start off with discussing what Gary had to say in the Dungeon Master's Guide for first edition. Alright, guys, before we get into the weeds, a really deep examination of what Gary had to say about monster races, I wanted to kind of fast forward and take us back to 2008, maybe 2011-ish, around that time, where 4th edition was actually out and there was a couple of supplements that they put out for player options. Besides the player's handbook, well, actually most of the available races for the game were found in player's handbook 1, 2, and 3 because there were three of them that they made for that edition. But this is Into the Unknown for D&D 4E, and also the Dungeon Delve. I don't really have the second one, so I think that one is more has to do specifically with dungeon delving, treasures, and things that happen in the dungeon. But the first one I did get a copy of, Into the Unknown, and it's a very interesting book because it does two things. One thing it highlights is the character themes. So they group different character option into themes, so you can become like a blood swarm, and there's different categories of characters and what their motivations are. Very similar to the fifth edition idea of backgrounds, where now even in Player's Handbook 2024 or in the new 2024 rules that they just released, they tie the character bonus, most of the character bonuses and stats and abilities to your background, as opposed to having it right off the bat from your when you start off your character during the character creation process in 5e. In fourth edition, Into the Unknown does have these different character creation options and based on the themes, and it also has a very good selection, I think, of monster races or races that you can play beyond what are available in the player's handbook, including the goblin. Like if you want to play a goblin, the book describes it as a pint-sized rascals known throughout the world. Everybody knows what a goblin is, but usually they're used as annoying, pesky adversaries. But you can have goblin adventures, and what's really cool about it, what I think, is that it really goes into different sections about goblin communities or the different monster races that you can play, their communities, how they interact, kind of like their culture, and and what they are like if they were a specific class. Like what would a goblin rogue be like, or what would be his motivation, or what would be a goblin wizard looking to do in game. And I think that really colors and gives a wider spectrum, a wider palette of options for characters, which was later on picked up in fifth edition as well, and expanded upon then. So you get goblin feats, and you can play a kobold, for example. Now kobolds are usually again thought of as annoying adversaries or low level creatures. Well, they could be kind of pesky and they could be dangerous because they have their pack tactics in fifth edition. But in fourth edition, if you wanted to play a kobold, especially this book talks about the underground settings such as caverns and dungeons, of course, and of course the underworld, those type of settings which are have traditionally been part of the game but haven't really been explored other than in specific modules. So it gives you character options to play a kobold, what your skills would be, and what your physical qualities would be, but it also gives you ideas on role playing a kobold. For example, it talks about their different ideals, such as the fact that they know their way around traps, so they're really you could see the utility, how useful they would be to a group of adventurers in a dungeon setting. Just kind of like what a thief would do back in the AD&D days, but kind of a specialist. A kobold really is adroit, an expert at setting traps and also knowing their way around traps. And then also the philosophy that dragons are gods to them. So if you encounter as a kobold playable character a dragon, you would naturally be inspired. It would give you inspiration, and I don't mean like mechanical wise, but you're inspired to become. That's what kobolds aspire to be, to become dragons. They're known as little dragons and stuff, and so they do end up worshiping dragons more often than not, and that really opens up again a good amount of role playing possibilities. For example, because these creatures, if you play a monster creature, the world is going to tend to, sometimes you're kind of like playing an outsider. It's kind of like this whole deal of how the world hates you because most people would consider kobolds like vermin, and the interactions would be tricky within specific settlements and regions and areas, other than like natural habitats for a kobold, like a cavern or like an underground setting. And then it gives you items connected to it. There's a lot of possibilities when it comes to like the monster races, and it's interesting to me. Again, this book really goes into kind of a deep dive into them, whereas Advanced Dungeons and Dragons did not. It was in fact discouraged by Gary Gygax, as I said at the top, from even playing them. So let's take a closer look at what he had to say about why it was dangerous or why it was discouraged to have a player character as a monster. Okay, so monster characters. What does Gary Gygax have to say about them? Well, he does write that monsters as a player character, on occasion one player or another will evidence a strong desire to operate as a monster, conceiving a playable character as a strong demon, a devil, a dragon, or one of the most powerful sort of undead creatures. This is done principally because the player sees the desired monster character as superior to his or her peers and likely to provide a dominant role for him or her in the campaign. A moment of reflection will bring them to the unalterable conclusion that the game is heavily weighed towards humankind. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is unquestionably humanocentric, with demi-humans, semi-humans, and humanoids in various orbits around the sun of humanity. Men are the worst monsters, particularly high-level characters such as clerics, fighters, and magic users, whether singly, in small groups, or in large companies. The ultra-powerful beings of another plane are more fearsome. The 3Ds of demigods, demons, and devils are enough to strike fear into most characters, yet let alone when the very gods themselves are brought into consideration. Yet, there is a point where the well-equipped, high-level party of adventurers can challenge a demon prince, an archdevil, or a demigod. While there might well be some near or part humans with the group, in so doing, it is certain that the leaders will be human. In cooperation, men bring ruin upon monsterdom, for they have no upper limits as to level or acquired power from spells or items. So, to paraphrase, you can play a powerful being such as a dragon or an archdevil, but ultimately the world is centered around the humans, and they have unlimited. They can be so powerful themselves and achieve unlimited levels of dominance, whereas the monsters have a certain cap, and they can be defeated if with preparation and other factors. And so that's why it was kind of he was kind of discouraging players from doing so. Having established the why of the humanocentric basis of the game, you will certainly see the impossibility of any lasting success for a monster player character. The environment for adventure will be built around humans and demi-humans for the most part. Similarly, the majority of participants in the campaign will be humans. So unless the player desires a character which will lurk alone somewhere and be hunted by adventurers, there are only a few options open to him or her. Now, I happen to think that this is kind of an archaic way of looking at things. Times have definitely changed, and while yes, there are, it is a game that's kind of centered on team building, going on team quests, doing group activities together. That doesn't necessarily preclude you from choosing a monster race, especially now the way they have things set up in 5e. I think it was the Volo's Guide to Monsters book that came out around 2020, 2017, 2020, around there. And that one gives you way more options, additional options. So you can play like a Kenku, or which is a bird-like creature, or a tabaxi. Tabaxis were pretty popular for a while, like cat people, tritons, and like underwater elves, and all turtles, all kinds of different species that were not available to in addition to the races that are found in the player handbook for 2014 and beyond. So I think that nowadays, because these races don't really unbalance. I think one of the main concerns was always having some kind of game balance, and you don't want the player characters to have too much power. And obviously, if you're running around with a player character that's a dragon, they're not gonna be able to interact with the world and the other party members because they usually are evil creatures, or creatures that are bent on destruction. And also just way too powerful. So that's one concern. And another concern had to do with, and that's just the balance of the game. And another concern had to do with the fact that that it's really up to the dungeon master to decide which races will be allowed. So in some settings it might seem appropriate, but in a lot of settings, the more powerful creatures or monster options don't really seem to fit into the narrative, into the setting, or into the game that you're looking to, the campaign you're looking to run. That's what I get from these limitations. So I just thought it was interesting to kind of take a stroll down memory lane and take a look at what Gygax had to say. With obviously times have changed, like I said, and in terms of player characters being monsters, people play them all the time. My own personal opinion is, like, I had a recent experience where I was gonna jump into this 5e game that my buddy of mine was running, and he limited I woke up, I guess because I was thinking a lot about Faerun and Icewind Dale, which is setting up in the north, kind of a harsh environment type world. And there's like a lot of Yetis running around, which are abominable snowman creatures. And I was like, well, it would be fun to play a Yeti. That kind of got lost and ended up south of Icewind Dale in Faerun, and is trying to find his way back to his to Icewind Dale, and kind of role play the circumstances why he would get lost, and and what his backstory and all that stuff. But the DM nixed it because he had other ideas, and it's kind of unfortunate because I think when the same thing happened to me, I was running a game, and one of the characters wanted to play a goblin, another wanted to play a satyr. And at the time, these were not playable options from the 2014 book, and it was before Volos and before these other options opened up. And I allowed them to play them because I do believe that you should tailor your game around your character as much as possible. You should tailor your game around your player characters, not the other way around. They should have to fit their desires. Because if you want to make them happy to the point where they're excited about playing in your table. And I think limiting the options is probably not a good way to start off. But that's my opinion. Your mileage may vary. Obviously, Gary Gygax had his opinions on this topic as well. But times, like I said a couple times already, times are different now. And if you want to play an orc as a playable character, you can. They're not always an adversary. And there are, it's a more wide open range of options for player characters than we've ever had in the past. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to my rant on gaming, Dungeons and Dragons, AD&D specifically. And may you have a lot of good game sessions coming up in the next few days and weeks and months. And may the rolls be with you.